Let's see. Matthew chapter 3, verse 1 and 2. In those days came John the Baptist, preaching in the wilderness of Judea, and saying, Repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Like a voice, preaching in the wilderness, like a voice, preaching in the wilderness. Can you hear the preacher? The preacher calling out in the wilderness. Can you hear the voice? Preacher calling. Can you hear the voice of the preacher in the wilderness? Can you recognize the voice? Can you hear the preaching in the wilderness where you are? Oh, 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 oh. Can you hear the preaching in the wilderness? Can you hear the voice preaching in the wilderness? Can you hear preaching in the wilderness where you are, where you are, where you are, where you are? Can you hear the preacher preaching in the wilderness? Can you hear? Can you hear the voice of a preacher preaching in the wilderness? Can you hear the that preaching voice in the wilderness where you are, where you are, where you are, where you are? Oh, do you hear the preacher preaching in the wilderness? Can you hear the preacher preaching out in your ear? Do you hear the preacher preaching in the wilderness? Do you hear? Can you hear the preacher preaching in the wilderness? Can you hear? Can you hear the preacher preaching to you? Can you hear the preacher preaching in the wilderness? Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Ooh, repent ye, for the kingdom is at hand. Do you hear the preacher preaching where you are? Can you hear the preacher preaching where you are? Can you hear? Repent all ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is near. Do you hear the preacher in the wilderness where you are? Do you hear the preacher preaching in the wilderness where you are? Repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Look around you, can't you see that the kingdom is calling? And repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. 2025. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. What you gonna do, bro? Vote. Glory, glory, glory. Yeah. Come on, glory.